In 2007, in this very spot, a prayer was offered by an Indigenous leader from New Zealand, Rose Perry. Rose is a tahuna, an elder and wisdom keeper for the Maori people. She offered this prayer as a song in her native language and called upon the spirit of earth and heaven, the guardians of the land and this place, all living creatures, as an invocation to begin a talk that evening. That event shaped my life in ways I did not really understand fully until much later. Part of that Maori prayer song I learned from Rose, which calls in the energies of Divine Father, Divine Mother, Divine Child, a trinity of sorts that serves as a prelude to a broader invocation that honors what you might call the interdependent web of existence, what Rose would call the essential oneness that binds us all together. That evening, Rose shared stories, songs, and more stories. In the West, sometimes, the language of story and song can seem different. Our analytical mind wants to jump ahead to what's the point, and the next point, and the PowerPoint. So this morning, I'd like to invite you to join me on a mystical journey to relax the linear, lean into the intuitive, maybe listen in a new way. Through story, song, and ritual, together, let's move into the heart of wonder and oneness. One of the stories Rose shared that evening was about the circumstances surrounding her birth. When her mother was pregnant, the present Maori elder, or tahuna, had a ceremony, and part of that, he threw a stick into the river. And when that stick moved upstream against the current, this was one of several signs that were interpreted to indicate she would be born the next tahuna. Rose was raised from birth to assume the role she would play in the community later in life. The reason Rose was even in the building that evening was all the way from New Zealand because the organization I worked for at the time, Energy Medicine Partnerships, was sponsoring her on a teaching tour. And this just happened to be one of the venues. We offered programs and classes in holistic health around the world. We worked with Indigenous leaders, healers, teachers. Later that same year, we organized a spiritual journey to New Zealand to immerse more fully in the teachings and of the Maori people. Quite some time after these events, I found myself at a crossroads of my own life. The founder and creator of the job I had was about to retire, and I would be entering a time of transition. I often seek the woods as a place of reflection, so I headed out to the Ina River and hiked to a part that I had never been before. And I sat on a rock. I listened. This Maori prayer song emerged, and I began to sing it softly, over, and over again. And then I sat and I listened. I felt a sense of peace, no great epiphany about my future, but I was grateful. I had been holding a small stick while I was sitting there, and I offered it to the river in thanks. And I noticed it became stuck, and I was frustrated because it seemed to be mirroring to me my own inner state. I wanted to be in the flow of life. I wanted to know what was going to happen next. When I looked more closely, and that stick began to move, but it began to move upstream. Now, I didn't really think this was possible, so the sun was setting. I took the line of a shadow of a tree, and I tracked it to prove to myself this was not happening. Yet there it was, slowly but surely moving upstream. In that instant, I remembered Rose's story and the song I had just been singing and realized that the world is more magical than my brain can sometimes process. I felt her presence strongly and felt supported and guided in invisible ways. I offered my gratitude and left with a renewed sense of wonder. Shortly after this, Energy Medicine was sponsoring a teaching event for Lama Surya Das, an American Buddhist teacher. And as I was booking space here at ERUUF on the website, I noticed there was a job opening. A few months later, I found myself working here. Now, I'm not suggesting that Rose somehow made all of this happen. I am acknowledging, though, that for all of us, there are seemingly invisible lines that guide our path at times, that connect us to one another, to places, to events, to moments that open us up to synchronicities, blessings, and even deeper connections on our spiritual journey. Our ancestral lineage is not limited to those with whom we share a genetic heritage. Teachers, mentors, and friends who inspire and shape our life also can be included in rituals of honoring the ancestors. I consider Rose Perry to be one of my mentors, a spiritual ancestor who opened the world to me in new ways. And though she passed in 2020, in her words and actions, she embodied a sense of oneness that interconnects us. She was recognized internationally and spoke at many conferences like the Parliament of World Religions, where she shared the wisdom of her lineage. Rose writes, "Let's be guardians of Mother Earth, Paptuanuku. Honor her, protect yourselves, and uphold the spirit of oneness. We are here to look after each other." This service today centers on celebrating the gifts of our ancestors. What would it be like to pause and ask, in the silence of your own heart, to name some of the gifts you have received from your ancestors? It may be a word, a feeling, a knowing, a sense of who you are and how you are, and maybe how you even got here. How have you been gifted, guided, supported, inspired in your own journey? Allow these questions to be present as we continue. In cultures all over the world, honoring ancestors has been part of spiritual practice for thousands of years. And there are various ways to honor and celebrate their gifts. Joan shared some of her beautiful spiritual practice in working with ancestors that offers rich meaning for her life. In many cultures, honoring and maintaining communication with ancestors contributes to the well-being and vitality of the living. Celtic spirituality author Edward Seldner writes, "We inherit from our ancestors gifts so often taken for granted. Each of us contains within this inheritance of soul. We are links between the ages, containing past and present expectations, sacred memories, and future promise. Lineage, lines of connection. We are the bridge. In this present moment, we are on the threshold between past and future, holding the legacy of all those that came before. In each moment, we are choosing, consciously or not, what we carry forward in our thoughts, our actions, our relationships, and our service. What gifts do we wish to carry forward? I really never thought about lineage that much until I worked with Maori elder Rose Perry. On that first visit to North Carolina, she demonstrated a unique process to clear ancestral lines, past and future. The site of that demonstration was on land that was adjacent to the Haw River, a detail that was not lost on me. I took this brief demonstration from the workshop and later on my own worked to bless and help those ancestors who had gone before in my own family tree. My father Also, Daniel Trollinger was the family historian. Ask him any question, he was like an encyclopedia of history. My childhood was full of visits to historical sites, museums, and even one time, the White House, where an unfortunate picture of me at age 8 has me wearing red, white, and blue striped bell-bottom patriotic pants for this visit. I shake my head at my former child self. My dad also researched the Trollinger family genealogy and traced our ancestors back to Germany. In 1738, Adam Trollinger, fleeing religious intolerance, sailed down the Rhine, crossed the Atlantic, landed in Philadelphia, came through Virginia, and settled in Haw River, North Carolina, a little town near Burlington. In fact, the broader genealogy my dad created was compiled into a booklet, and you can find that booklet in the Little Haw River Museum. There is also a cemetery in Haw River, full of Trollingers and their relations, surrounded by this short stone wall. And the stone is of the same stone as the Duke Chapel, because, as it turns out, the ancestors of the Duke lineage, Benjamin Washington Duke, their mother was in the Trollinger line. As she died when they were very young, a trust was established for the cemetery and her ancestors, her family cemetery. Again, invisible lines, as years ago I used to work at Duke University, as some of you do. So one afternoon I set off to conduct a healing ceremony in Little Haw River, North Carolina. And at first, I admit, I was a little self-conscious, and I felt alone. These people are not here. These are just gravestones. What are you doing here in this cemetery? I turned within, I got centered, and I listened. I called on the ancestors and began to offer prayers, blessings, to clear the family line, restore balance, and bless the lineage, past and future, for any present or future members of the extended family. I was there for a long time, with a range of emotions from troubled to moved to supported, until it all felt complete. Again, no big epiphany, just a sense of peace and gratitude. I ended up doing a similar ceremony in Raleigh at a cemetery that was identified by my mother's genealogical work on her side of the ancestral line. I mention these personal experiences to open possibilities. It is not necessary to go to a cemetery to conduct a family blessing or healing ceremony. It can be done in your own home or backyard. A genealogy is not required. Appreciation and gratitude are forms of a blessing. However, what do you do with ancestors that you're not particularly proud of, or a part of family history that is troubled? There's no instant way to make pain disappear, but a ceremony can be a start. I did not consciously know of any specific family transgressions or issues that would need intergenerational healing. Nevertheless, I offered this ceremony with the intention to bless and heal what needed to be healed, to restore right relationship within the family, with the land, with the earth, past, present, and future. Indigenous traditions sometimes speak of thinking 7 generations into the future when offering ancestral prayers. For one day we will all be ancestors for future generations. The lineage lines go in both directions for our genetic line and our spiritual family. We are the bridge. We can choose what we bring forward. How have you been shaped by your ancestors? How would you like to acknowledge and celebrate these gifts? even entering the space of these questions can bring up feelings associated with loss or grief. I get that. It's important to listen to these feelings because they often have something to teach us. Sometimes acknowledging the gifts of ancestors can be bittersweet. I lost my dad 2 months into the whole pandemic shutdown. The funeral was simple, as only a few of us could attend at the graveside. And while it was not the send-off we had envisioned, it did contain elements that he requested. I actually sat down with him about a year before then and planned the service with him. I used to tell him he was unstoppable, as he had overcome in his life 2 heart attacks, bypass surgery, colon cancer, lung cancer, and much more. But my dad was more than just a survivor. He taught me through example about invisible acts of kindness. This is a gift from him I will always treasure. And I still miss him today. He is buried not in Haw River, but in Columbia, Maryland, in the town where I grew up. It is also the town, Invisible Lines, that Joan Tillman lived for many years. And a side note, the reason my parents chose to move there was similar to the ones Joan shared with me recently about her decision to move there with her family in the 70s. Columbia was a planned community with a progressive vision to be more equitable, diverse, and inclusive of people from all backgrounds. There were interfaith centers, houses of worship that held multiple faith traditions in the same building. There were greenways, community gardens, and so on. And while it was not perfect, I do appreciate the gifts of this place and how it impacted my life journey. I believe the gifts we receive from our ancestors are like seeds of light. Even though they may take time to ripen or bloom, they often shape and guide the path of our life. And these seeds can have a profound effect as they touch others. When we bring our seeds of light together in community, gathering gifts with intention and purpose, the impact can be exponential, far beyond what we can imagine on our own. And working here at ERUUF for 13 years, one of the things that continues to amaze me is watching you in this congregation. Share your gifts, share your passion, work for something greater than yourself. Whether you are brand new or have been here for years, I see you. I see you share your gifts, fight for justice, learn and grow and work together. I see how you give so much to care for this place, for each other, and also for the world. I acknowledge the seeds of light that you are planting now and for the future in helping shape this beloved community. I think back on how this fellowship began from a small group of committed ancestors. In the gallery, there's a plaque with the original 42 members' names on that plaque. There are 2 living ancestors on that plaque, Georgie and Rick Searles. Much, much gratitude. Founded in 1966, these original members and many others who followed, some are sitting in this room, helped build the community, the heart and soul of what ERUUF is today. And part of the DNA of this place is to think, to act, and to dream boldly. With your gifts, what is the legacy that you wish to leave to this place? For ERUUF is more than just this campus and this building. Our ripple effect moves out to touch lives and families, present and future, and goes beyond the walls into the greater community. The commitment to be radically welcoming, the commitment to racial inclusion and equity, the commitment to justice in so many forms. These are the gifts of ERUUF's ancestors, and this is part of the legacy for today. What seeds of light would you like to share from your heart with this community, with the world? Sometimes the opportunity to offer our gifts comes in an unexpected way and is not an individual effort at all. Sometimes life shows up with challenges and we are asked to meet that moment and requires us to co-create together, even when it is hard. Our world is in crisis. The challenges before us are great. What is required of us to help heal a broken world? There are no magic words that brings life back into balance, that heals and stores relationships or alleviates suffering. When we choose to center in our heart and act with intention and co-create seeds of light, it makes a difference, even if we don't see it or feel it in that moment. The gifts of our ancestors, all our ancestors, invite us to pause and remember both where we came from and where we're going, and what we are called to co-create together. When we remember that we're all part of the one, connected in ways beyond knowing, we can, even with small choices, plant seeds of light to foster oneness and wonder. This is my prayer, my hope for today, that we honor and celebrate the gifts of our ancestors, that we choose to bring these gifts forward in beloved community, that we, all of us, remember. May it be so. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.